this is Gary Moore. On this subject of communism, you may have wondered how the Russians feel about it. Unless you've had the opportunity to travel overseas, you've probably never talked with a Russian communist. For a pretty good idea of what it's like, I'm going to introduce you to a very interesting man who knows the Russians well. He is Charles T. Vetter, a training officer with the United States Information Agency. A few years ago, he helped train the guides at the American exhibit in Moscow. Nowadays, he's also helping Peace Corps volunteer groups understand the communists that they may meet as they do their work overseas. Mr. Vetter was a lawyer before joining our government in the State Department in 1950. Since 1953, he's been traveling in many parts of the world, working with the USIA. Here then is Charles T. Vetter explaining what everyone should know about Soviet propaganda.
We in the democratic world are challenged to communicate in a way we've never been challenged before. There's a competition in the field of ideas today that we've got to take account of. We have millions of Americans going all over the world. We're being asked questions overseas in our own countries, and people are asking us questions not just out of sheer curiosity, because many, many times they're asking us questions because they're looking for answers to their own human problems in their own country, in their own lives, in their own families. Today, we're more than ever called upon to compete and recognize a competition in the field of ideas. Of course, one of the complicating factors today is that the communists are placing ideas in people's minds, are placing questions in people's minds at the very time they are claiming they have answers for all of the questions of the world. Now, one of our problems, for instance, in training Americans to communicate and to participate in this tremendous world dialogue that's going on today, where people are exchanging thoughts and ideas and concepts, and people today are trying to find ways of meeting a very complicated and yet a very thrilling situation throughout the world. One of our problems in getting Americans to communicate is to get them to understand the kinds of questions that are on people's minds around the world, but also to get them conscious of the fact that we are faced with a competition that's challenging us to excellence in this field of putting our points of view, putting our ideas, our personalities, our problems across in human terms. Now, one of the training techniques that we use in training people to go overseas, and I've used this, I should say, for about 5 or 6 years, is to give people an idea of how our competition, specifically the communists, are talking to people, how they're answering questions. And I'd like to share this technique with you and assume the role, for this purpose, of a communist official to show you how he would take questions and answer them from you, the audience. For the next few minutes, let me assume the role of Alexander Petrovich Serov. I'm working with the Ministry of Culture, and I've been in your very beautiful country for the last 18 months, working on exchange of exhibitions, cultural presentations between our two very great peoples. It's a wonderful thing for me to be here and to see your people. And as representative of the Soviet people, I bring to you the love of the Soviet people for the American peoples. And I've been touched and warmed in my heart by love of American peoples that I have experienced here from your hospitality. I also want to bring you condolences from Soviet people for the loss of your great president, because this bestial act in civilized times has shocked the whole world and the Soviet people, and we bring you these condolences. But I must be honest with you. You know, every one of us realizes we must have peaceful coexistence. Nuclear warfare would mutually destroy the great progress our peoples have made since the war. And we must find peaceful ways of competing in the field of science, industry, trade, ideas, culture, sports. Don't be too discouraged by Olympics. Practice a little, you might catch up. But we must do this in a peaceful way. You realize this. And this is why I'm very happy to be here, because I'll be honest with you, I have been shocked and alarmed by the war psychosis that's building up, tension, hatred, mostly because I think you don't understand Soviet point of view. And so I'd like to take some of your questions, and I'll do my best to answer you honestly and directly. Yes? Oh, yes, if we're so peaceful and want peaceful coexistence, how about the wall in Berlin? Well, you know, the two questions I get most frequently from Americans are these. If you are so confident as a system, why the wall in Berlin? Of course, the Germans built it, but we support the policy. Secondly, if you are so peace-loving, why did you resume the testing of nuclear bombs? Well, you know, to understand both of these questions, you must understand Soviet psychology a little bit. We say we hate war. This isn't just a slogan. We hate war. We have had 15 million people killed in the Great Patriotic War. We have had 47% of our housing, buildings, agriculture devastated during these horrible wars. And this is why we're so sensitive to aggression and to war. We've been invaded by Tartars, Napoleon, Hitler, a U-2 airplane, forgive me, and we're very sensitive. Now, we have proposed a peace treaty for Germany. What was reaction of so-called Western powers? Rearmament, hatred, remobilization. At the very time in Sahara Desert, Africa, French NATO, North Atlantic allies were testing nuclear bombs. So with great heartache, we resumed the testing of bombs to let any potential aggressor know the camp of communism had the capacity to put down aggression any place in the world. We hope the message got through. Now, secondly, you are frightening us again. Why are you rearming the German Nazi militaries? Don't you learn from what happened in the wars, what Germans do when they get the capacity to make war? And I'll tell you very honestly, you know, we're crazy about pictures in Soviet Union. I think in this country you call them visual aids or something like this. And this little picture shows us how we feel. Do any of you read Russian language? Of you educated elitists? I wonder. I'll read it for you. You know, in the Soviet Union, we had 700,000 Soviets who were studying English language last year. We are studying very hard because we want to know. But this little picture shows how it says, "Nas svoyu golavu," on your head. And we feel the responsibility is on the head of your government for putting NATO sign over the old swastika of the Nazis. In Berlin, where the wall is, you've made Berlin Cold War capital, center of hate, espionage, propaganda, dirty tricks. You've gotten the Germans so psychotic and neurotic they were going in both directions. So we said, let's build a little wall for peaceful, rational time, for negotiation of free Berlin and peace treaty, and then we could knock it down this wall. And this is still very important. What is this? Or if we're so peaceful, why did we send into Cuba the missiles? Well, you know, you don't understand how we feel about Cuba. You know, Castro has become a hero of national liberation movements and reaction against colonialism. This little picture shows how we feel about him. This says in Russian, "Мы победим," we will conquer, or we will reach victory. And this says, "Народы мира с тобою, Cuba." The peoples of the world are with you, Cuba. We feel fraternally about this heroic revolutionary republic because they are struggling for independence just as we were in 1919, where outside forces were trying to starve us out, to keep us out of the world. We also had American troops occupying Murmansk, Vladivostok, parts of Siberia, and we have a real fraternal interest in these people. We're trying everything we can to help them out. And when we saw you were planning another invasion of like Bay of Pigs, we said, how can we stop? So we put in defensive missiles to let your leadership know that there would be nuclear experience in the United States if there was invasion. Fortunately, your president has gotten the answer, promised the world there'd be no invasion, so we took it away, these missiles. And here was a victory for peaceful negotiation and peaceful coexistence. Now, let me invite you all to visit Soviet Union. Open your minds and hearts. People say to me, well, I am a religionist. I'll be persecuted. This is ridiculous. If you'd like to visit some of our churches, like 14,000 of your American tourists did last year, come, feel free. Crawl around on the floor for a couple hours, kiss pictures for a couple hours. You'll be perfectly free and protected. But you'll find few people there. Why? Where are the Soviets looking for answers of future? Not to religious mythology or legends. They're looking to science. As Yuri Gagarin here. This says, Sovietskoye nauki slava. All praise to the Soviet science. And here is the first man in orbit. German Stepanovich Titov went around 17 times to show Yuri didn't make a big mistake. Valentina Tereshkova, the lady cosmonaut, couldn't even fly an airplane 48 times. Biakovsky, 81, showing what socialist man and science can do to uplift of space and every field of human endeavor. This is why millions of people are looking to communism for the space age answers. Now let's come out of the role and come back to normal. Why have I done this? I think you can see the reason why. This gives a living human experience of how our competition is talking to people. I think it's very important that we have a realistic idea of our opposition. You notice some of the techniques I used. I'd take the question, I'd answer it or slip off of it, and then I'd use the question as a platform for my pitch or for what I was going to say anyway. Then I would use half-truths. It's pretty easy to combat a complete lie, but the communists are very skilled, as you notice, in using half-truths. I'd also exploit audience courtesy. You couldn't answer me back. Well, I think we must know these things, but you know, in the final analysis, the best anti-communism is a positive alternative. We've got to be realistic about what we're up against, but we've got to know ourselves. And you know, one of the problems we have today is we often don't realize the tremendous human progress democracy's made. We're pretty problem-centered. One reason for this is that in an open society today, there's so much competition for our attention with a tremendous variety of communications available that we're constantly competing for people's attention. What kind of news travels fastest? Bad news, problems, horrendous. And we're accentuating the negative. Also, we're very self-critical. This is the way a democracy gets its problems up to the surface, so we do something about it. It's one of the secrets of our productivity, but it accentuates the negative. And many times we get into the frame of mind by who are we to give help to Africa? Who are we to give help to Asia? With our juvenile delinquency, civil rights, unemployment, divorce. Who should we be to tell anybody anything? And sometimes we get into this attitude of comparing the problems of Africa and the United States on the same level. Now, this is a great injustice to Africa and to the United States. It's like comparing the problems of an automobile and a camel. Why, the automobile is tremendous human progress. It's liberated man's time, energy, his mind for much more human things than sitting on the back of a camel for hours. Does this mean we no longer have any problems of transportation? Why, we've got transportation problems the camel driver never dreamed of. Parking, repair, slaughter on the highway, traffic, necking, all kinds of problems you don't have with a camel unless you're very versatile. Now, we've got to have the confidence to see the tremendous human progress of democracy and put our problems in the prospectus of this progress. Because if we don't have self-confidence, we're not going to inspire confidence in other countries, to say nothing of confidence in our own youth. We've also, I feel very strongly, we have to humanize our message to the world. You know, our society is getting more impersonal with mechanization, science, technology. Our competition is constantly humanizing on things like their magazine here that emphasizes children's drawings, children's things, articles on life, on humaneness. We've got the answers to these things, but we've got to keep in our society and projection the human being above the machine. We've got to have a means of getting to people. But you know, in this area of ideas, if we're really going to communicate, if we're really going to compete, we're going to have to use our heads. We're also going to have to use our hearts, because hate is a very poor tool in the hands of free men. And we're going to have to focus the tremendous experience of free men in solving human problems. Thank God, in my experience, I'm beginning to see the free world waking up and concentrating on this new problem and new challenge. And it's wonderful the kinds of things we're doing to communicate to the world at last.